I've always known my place in the Mitchell family, one seat behind my sister. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 32, and for as long as I can remember, I've lived in the shadow of Amber Reed, my older sister by 3 years, and my parents' favorite person on earth. Amber was the golden child. She married early, had 2 beautiful boys, and somehow made casseroles that ended up on family Facebook posts like trophies. My parents, Frank and Diane Mitchell, talked about her as if she were a hometown celebrity. Every success story began with her name, and every disappointment ended with mine. Your sister just knows how to make time for family. Mom would sigh whenever I missed a Sunday dinner because of work. Dad would chuckle. You take after me. Lauren had always in numbers. Not people. It was supposed to sound like affection. It didn't. I learned to live quietly in my little apartment across town. I had a good job at a financial firm, a 401k, and a cat that didn't judge me for eating leftovers 3 nights in a row. Independence became my armor. The more they ignored me, the more I convinced myself I didn't need to be seen. But memory is cruel. It keeps the things you try to bury. Sometimes, when I wash dishes late at night, I still hear my mother's voice from years ago. Let Amber have the last slice, sweetheart. She needs it more. That slice of pie felt like a metaphor I didn't understand until much later. At holidays, I became the helper, the one refilling glasses, fixing the Wi-Fi, and smiling in the background of photos I didn't want to be in. I'd bring expensive wine they never opened, small gifts they forgot to unwrap. Once, when Dad toasted at Christmas, he raised his glass and said, "To Amber, for giving this family 2 wonderful boys." Everyone clapped. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "And to Lauren for, keeping busy." Laughter followed, the kind that stings because it's not meant to hurt. But it does. I told myself it didn't matter, that being invisible was safer than being rejected. But beneath the calm, I was collecting quiet disappointments like stones in my pockets. Amber's life looked perfect from the outside warm lights. Family dinners, smiling children. Mine looked small by comparison, even to me. But I had peace. Or at least, I thought I did. Because what I didn't know then was that distance doesn't always protect you. Sometimes, the people you step away from find new ways to pull you back closer than you ever wanted to be. And when that happens, love stops feeling like family. It starts feeling like debt. It happened quietly like a picture frame slipping from a wall you thought was secure. Amber Reed, my flawless sister, the woman who hosted holiday dinners and sent thank you cards to the neighbors, called me one night with a tremor in her voice. "Tom's been cheating," she said. 3 words that didn't sound real coming from her. At first, I thought I'd misheard. Amber never lost control, never forgot to smile, never failed at anything. But that night, her voice cracked, and all the polish she'd worn her whole life shattered into dust. Their marriage, the one my parents had built their entire pride on, was gone. Tom Reed, the picture-perfect husband, had left without apology, leaving behind 2 little boys and a pile of unpaid bills. When I drove to Amber's house, she looked small sitting on the couch surrounded by half-packed boxes and children's toys. Her mascara streaked like bruises down her face. She said she hadn't told Mom and Dad yet. I knew she wanted me to go first to soften the blow. I did. I always did. My parents' reaction was predictable. Mom gasped like the world had ended. Dad paced the kitchen, muttering about how men can't handle real women, but under their outrage, I could already see something else fear. Amber's perfection was their reflection. Without it, the family image cracked, and they didn't know what to do with the pieces. When Amber finally told them herself, they clung to her like she might disappear if they didn't. "We'll get through this," Mom whispered, kissing her forehead. "We always do." I waited for someone to look my way, to remember that I was standing there, too. But their eyes never left her. I became the safety net. I paid her divorce lawyer's retainer, 6 months of rent on a small apartment, groceries when her part-time job didn't stretch far enough. I told myself it was love, not obligation. That's what sisters did. Every time I helped, Amber's voice would break a little less, and mine would grow quieter. She'd thank me softly, but never once offer to repay. It wasn't her fault she'd been raised to believe someone else would fix it. Still, I kept hoping that maybe this time, my parents would finally see me not as the backup plan, not as the one who's fine on her own, but as the daughter who never stopped showing up. They didn't. And that silence was louder than any insult. It started with a phone call that sounded too bright to be real. "Lauren, honey," Mom said, her voice sugar-sweet. "We have wonderful news. Can you come over tonight? Your father's already home, and Amber will be here too." Her cheerfulness felt rehearsed, the kind of tone she used when she wanted something. But I wanted to believe it was good news for once. Maybe Amber had gotten a promotion, or the boys had won some award at school. Maybe, for once, the family gathering wasn't about me fixing something. I drove across town after work, the sky turning a bruised shade of purple. Their house looked exactly as it always had porch light on, the smell of Diane Mitchell's lemon furniture polish leaking through the door. When I stepped inside, they were already waiting. Frank Mitchell, my father, sat in his recliner, hands folded across his stomach. Amber perched on the couch beside Mom, smiling faintly, like someone bracing for impact. "There she is," Dad said, rising with exaggerated warmth. "Our dependable girl." That phrase the dependable one used to make me proud. Now, it just felt like another way of saying you'll fix it. On the coffee table sat a thick manila folder. My father handed it to me with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Take a look at this." Inside were pages of mortgage documents stamped with a real estate company's logo. My stomach twisted. "What is this?" I asked. Mom clasped her hands, beaming. "It's for Amber's new house, isn't it wonderful? 3 bedrooms, big yard for the boys, great school district. We used most of our savings and a little from our retirement for the down payment." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. "You bought a house for Amber and the kids," she said proudly. "They deserve a fresh start." "That's great," I said, and I meant it. I really did. The boys needed stability. I started to hand the folder back, but Mom stopped me. "No, sweetheart," she said gently. "Those papers are for you." The room went silent. "For me," I repeated. Dad cleared his throat. "We've decided you'll take over the mortgage payments. You've been saving for years. You can handle it. Amber can't." I just stared at him, the words not sinking in fast enough. "I've been saving for my own home," I said quietly. "For my future." Diane leaned forward, her eyes soft but her tone sharp. "Lauren, we raised you. We've done so much for you. Isn't it time you gave back? You don't have a husband. You don't have kids. You're in the best position to help. That's what family does." Amber's eyes dropped to her lap. "I can't do this on my own," she whispered. "You're so good with money. Lauren, I need a real home for the boys." It was the guilt that did it, the way they wrapped manipulation in tenderness. I stood up slowly, the folder still in my hand. "You bought a house knowing she couldn't afford it because you assumed I'd pay for it," I said, my voice shaking. Mom frowned, the mask cracking. "That's not fair, Lauren, no," I said. "It's not." I placed the folder back on the table. For a second, nobody moved. The air was thick with the kind of silence that only comes before something breaks. Then I turned and walked out. Outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the house that had never felt like home, realizing that in their eyes, my worth would always be measured by what I could provide. And for the first time, I understood something I'd spent my whole life avoiding. They didn't want me in the family. They just wanted what I could give. 2 days after I walked out of my parents' house, the silence began to hum. It wasn't peace, it was pressure, building from somewhere I couldn't see yet. Then the first call came. Tiffany, my cousin, who hadn't spoken to me since Grandpa's funeral, called without even saying hello. "I can't believe you're doing this to Amber," she snapped. "She's a single mother. Lauren, those boys are your nephews." I held the phone to my ear, stunned. "Doing what, refusing to help? Everyone knows about the house. You're sitting on savings while she's struggling." Her words hit like stones. I tried to explain, but she wasn't listening. "Family helps family," she said, voice dripping with judgment. Before hanging up, I thought it was an isolated misunderstanding. It wasn't. Within a day, the messages poured in texts, voicemails, Facebook comments from people I barely remembered. Uncle Don wrote, "It's shameful how money changes people." Cousin Jessica commented under one of my photos. Some of us remember who raised us. My phone vibrated nonstop. Each notification, another reminder that love in my family had never been private. It was performance. Someone, probably Mom, had told her version of the story first. That night, Aunt Patty called. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the kind she used when pretending to care. "Lauren, dear, you're not getting any younger. Who knows if you'll ever have children? At least this way you'd be contributing to your family's future." I almost laughed, but it came out as a gasp. "So, because I'm single, I owe Rachel sorry. Amber a house." "Don't be dramatic," she chided. "They need help, and you can afford it. Think of it as your role in the family." When I hung up, I realized there was no misunderstanding. It was a campaign subtle, relentless, and cruel. My parents had painted me as selfish, the ungrateful daughter hoarding her blessings while her sister suffered. I sat at my kitchen counter, staring at my silent phone, and for the first time in months, I cried. Not because of what they said, but because I'd spent so long trying to prove I was good, useful, worth their love, and it still wasn't enough. They didn't see my kindness as generosity. They saw it as obligation. By the end of the week, I'd blocked every number that brought me guilt instead of peace, one by one. I erased the noise. As I sat in the quiet that followed, I began to see something clearly for the first time. This wasn't about the house. It never had been. It was about control, the currency my family used in place of love. And the moment I stopped giving them what they wanted, they called it betrayal. But deep down, I knew the truth. The betrayal had started long before I said no. 2 months passed in silence. I started to think maybe the storm had blown over, that my parents had finally realized how wrong they were. I went to work, cooked dinner for one, and learned to enjoy the quiet again. But peace never lasts long in the Mitchell family. It only hides before it strikes. One Thursday morning, a thick white envelope arrived in my mailbox. It looked official, cold, expensive. The return address said Frank and Diane Mitchell. My heart stumbled before I even opened it. Inside, I found page after page of legal language-dense paragraphs, numbered claims, and a title that made my stomach drop. Mitchell versus Mitchell. They were suing me. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, but there it was in black ink. Plaintiffs Frank and Diane Mitchell are seeking $450,000 in reimbursement for expenses related to the upbringing, care, and education of the defendant, Lauren Mitchell. I laughed an ugly, hollow sound. They'd listed everything: food, clothing, utilities, even something called emotional guidance during adolescence. They'd turned parenthood into a billing statement. The last page broke me. It read funds to be used to complete the mortgage on the Mitchell property purchased for Amber Reed and her minor children. It wasn't about fairness, it was leverage. They wanted to shame me into paying for Amber's house by calling it repayment. I sat on my couch for an hour, staring at the papers, numb. The betrayal was so surreal it almost felt theatrical. I kept whispering the same question over and over. How could you? When I finally gathered myself, I called a lawyer, Clara Reynolds, a recommendation from a coworker. She met me the next morning, all calm focus and quiet intelligence. She flipped through the documents without expression, then looked up. They have no legal claim. Parents can't charge adult children for raising them. Then why sue me, I asked. Leverage, she said simply. They're hoping you'll pay to avoid court. Or maybe they just want to hurt you enough to make you give in. I looked at her, realizing she was right. My parents weren't after justice, they were after control. Again. That night, I sat by my window, the lawsuit spread across the table like a map of everything I'd ever given them. I thought about the years of birthday dinners I'd paid for, the bills I'd quietly covered, the holidays I'd salvaged with last-minute gifts. None of it mattered. They'd turned love into debt and gratitude into currency. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, one by one. I promised myself something then, this time. I wouldn't pay. Not with money. Not with silence. Not with guilt. If they wanted a courtroom, I'd meet them there. Because if love had a price, I was finally done paying it. The following weeks moved like slow thunder quiet on the surface, but charged underneath. Clara Reynolds told me to gather every record I could find, every transfer, every favor that could prove how much I'd already given. So, I did. At night, my living room became a battlefield of paper, receipts, bank statements, old text messages all scattered across the floor. I found proof of the $7,200 I'd paid for Amber's rent, the $5,500 check to her divorce lawyer, the small deposits into my parents' account labeled Dad's pension shortfall, each one a memory I hadn't meant to keep. With every document I pulled, I saw pieces of my life I'd buried, birthdays I'd spent fixing their problems, holidays where I showed up with gifts no one remembered. I thought I was helping. Now, I saw it for what it was, evidence of how love in my family always came with a receipt. There were nights I couldn't sleep, nights I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I should just pay them to make it stop. The old guilt crept in, whispering that peace was worth the price. But Clara's words echoed louder. They're using guilt as a weapon. You don't negotiate with manipulation. So, I kept going. I organized every file into neat folders, labeled each one with dates and names, the way I'd done at work for years. Only this time, it wasn't numbers, it was my life, cataloged and exposed. One evening, as I finished the last folder, I sat back and looked at the stacks. I expected to feel anger, but what I felt instead was something sharper clarity. For the first time, I saw my family not through nostalgia or longing, but through truth. I wasn't the broken daughter they made me out to be. I was the one who kept everything standing, and this time, I wasn't going to apologize for it. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant, the kind of place where time felt heavier than air. I arrived early with Clara Reynolds, my lawyer, holding a folder that felt like a shield. Across the aisle sat my parents, Frank and Diane Mitchell, and my sister Amber, perfectly composed, like they were posing for a family photo at a funeral. Behind them sat a cluster of relatives' faces I hadn't seen in years, faces that had flooded my phone with accusations. They whispered to each other, shooting glances that made my skin crawl. On my side sat only two people, Grandma Evelyn and Grandpa Walt Graham, hands folded, eyes steady. They didn't need to speak, their presence said enough. When the judge entered, the room snapped to silence. He was older, gray at the temples, his expression unreadable. "We'll begin," he said simply. Dad stood first, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, we're not unreasonable people. We invested our lives and money into raising Lauren. All we're asking is that she return a small portion to help her sister and her nephews." I wanted to laugh at the word invested, like I'd been a stock that didn't yield enough returns. The judge nodded slowly, flipping through papers. "Mr. Mitchell, can you clarify what expenses you incurred after your daughter turned 18? Dad hesitated. "Well, at that time, we were helping Amber and her husband get established. So you did not contribute financially to Lauren's education." The judge interrupted. Mom jumped in quickly. Her grandmother did. But since she's my mother, I'd say we supported her indirectly. A quiet scoff came from behind me. Grandma didn't even try to hide it. Clara rose, her tone steady, respectful, but sharp as glass. Your Honor, we have documentation showing that Ms. Mitchell has been financially independent since the age of 18, and that she has repeatedly provided financial support to both her parents and her sister. She handed the judge a thick binder, rent payments, legal fees, direct deposits, all of it verified. The judge flipped through the evidence. So the defendant was not receiving support but providing it. Correct? Clara said. Mom shifted in her seat, her voice rising with desperation. That money isn't relevant. We're talking about the cost of raising her food, shelter, emotional guidance. Mrs. Mitchell, the judge said evenly. Why are you seeking reimbursement now? Mom faltered, glancing at Amber. To help Amber pay her mortgage, she admitted softly. The air left the room. Even the relatives behind them shifted uncomfortably. The judge turned to Amber. Ms. Reed, do you believe your sister should be responsible for your home loan? Amber looked up, her voice trembling. She doesn't have children. I do. And family looks out for each other. The judge raised an eyebrow. So, because she's single and childless, she owes you financial support. Amber blinked, silent. The judge leaned back, taking off his glasses. I'm not married either, he said dryly. Should I pay for my clerk's rent? A faint ripple of laughter broke out before the courtroom fell quiet again. Clara stood once more. Your Honor, my client has endured emotional harassment, public humiliation, and now this baseless lawsuit, all for refusing to bankroll her family's financial decisions. This isn't a matter of money. It's about coercion. Frank bristled. We're her parents, he said loudly. We gave her everything. I finally spoke, my voice steadier than I felt. You gave me life. I gave you loyalty. We're even. Mom's eyes burned into mine, disbelief and fury mixing like poison. How dare you talk to us like this for once? I said quietly. I'm talking to you at all. The judge lifted a hand, signaling for silence. That's enough, he said. I've heard everything I need to. He shuffled his papers, the sound echoing like a verdict before it came. After reviewing the evidence, I find the plaintiff's claim to be without merit. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, raising a child does not entitle you to reimbursement once that child becomes an adult. Furthermore, the evidence demonstrates that Ms. Mitchell has already provided substantial financial support to you both. He looked up, his tone soft but cutting. Frankly, I find your behavior toward your daughter to be brazen and disappointing. The gavel struck once, clean and final, case dismissed. I didn't cheer, I didn't cry. I just sat there as the noise faded, feeling the weight that had lived on my chest for years begin to lift. Clara gave my arm a small squeeze. Grandma reached over from behind and whispered, You were steady, sweetheart. That's more than they can say. Across the aisle, Mom wouldn't look at me. Dad stared straight ahead. Amber gathered her purse with trembling hands, her face pale and unreadable. As I walked out of the courtroom, sunlight hit my face through the tall glass doors. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on trial. And I didn't owe anyone a damn thing. The courtroom verdict didn't feel like victory. It felt like quiet, a kind of silence I hadn't known in years. When the judge's gavel struck, it didn't just end a lawsuit. It ended the illusion that my family was built on love. For days after, no one called, no messages, no apologies, no outrage. Just stillness. Clara Reynolds sent me the final paperwork to sign, and I did so with steady hands. The story was over, at least on paper. Then, a week later, Grandma Evelyn called. Her voice carried that fragile warmth that only grandmothers have. Your mother came by yesterday, she said. I froze, bracing for whatever came next. She asked if we'd consider releasing her inheritance early, for what I asked, even though I already knew. To pay off Amber's mortgage, Grandma said quietly. I sat there, speechless. My mother had learned nothing. She'd walked out of a courtroom humiliated, and her first thought was still how to shift her mistakes onto someone else's shoulders. What did you tell her? I told her we haven't decided who gets what, Grandma said, and that crying over money doesn't make you right. Her voice trembled not with sadness, but exhaustion. It broke my heart a little that even she was tired of loving people who only took. Months passed. I bought a small house, a 2-bedroom place with creaky floors and a patch of yard out back. I painted the kitchen yellow because I could. I planted tomatoes, adopted a gray cat, and stopped waiting for calls that never came. Amber moved back in with my parents, renting out the house I'd once been expected to pay for. They found comfort in each other's dysfunction, orbiting around guilt like a dying planet refusing to burn out. Sometimes, I still thought about them, usually on quiet mornings when sunlight hit the kitchen counter just right. I wondered if they missed me, or if they just missed what I used to give. Either way, I didn't reach out, because peace, I was learning, wasn't the absence of noise. It was the choice to stop listening. Almost a year passed before they tried again. It came in the form of an email, no subject line, just a block of text written in my mother's polite, practiced tone. Since you have extra space now, we think it would be best if Amber and the boys moved in with you. It would be more convenient for them. Let us know when they can move. Love. Mom and Dad. I read it twice, then a third time. There was no apology, no hesitation, just expectation. The same old rhythm dressed as kindness. Once, that message would have shattered me. I would have written back paragraphs, trying to explain, trying to make them understand. This time, I didn't hesitate. I typed a single response: I will not be hosting Amber or the boys. Any further contact about this will be treated as harassment. Do not email me again. Then I hit send, blocked their address, and sat still for a long moment. I didn't feel anger, just clarity. Outside, the afternoon light poured through my kitchen window, the walls warm and yellow, the scent of basil filling the air. My gray cat sat on the sill, watching birds he'd never catch. For the first time, the quiet didn't feel empty, it felt earned. Sometimes Grandma Evelyn and Grandpa Walt came by on Sundays, bringing pie or old newspaper clippings they thought I'd like. We didn't talk about my parents unless I asked, and I rarely did. They said Mom still told people I'd abandoned the family. Maybe that was true, but I'd finally learned something my family never did. Peace isn't something you wait for. It's something you claim.